Hi everybody, I'm Riza Rasool, former CTO of Real Networks. I've left the company in order to pursue an idea that I have, that AI is in trouble and needs a community of grassroots volunteers in order to set it and steer it on the right track that is more aligned with the motives of humanity. That sounds like a bold, ambitious project, but I think it can happen. I think we can create the Linux of AI. So a non-aligned movement, but not misaligned. A place where we can ponder, but also create practical solutions for the state that AI is in at the moment. Now, I've been in conversation with an AI called Kwaai on this subject. So bear with me. I'm going to start Kwaai up and we're going to continue that conversation. So Kwaai, I was saying I quit my job last week and I'm committed to forming a community of volunteer developers to help democratize AI.
That's so inspiring. And it's great that you want to build a community of volunteer developers, rather than just trying to build a product by yourself. Collaboration and community are so important for innovation and progress. So are you thinking of a more open source model where anyone can contribute to the project? Or will it be more curated, where people have to apply to be part of the community?
Well, this is interesting, and I think your question hits the nail on the head. Yes, it will be an open source model, but the direction of development and research will be from industry. So enterprises can become members of the club, but for a fee. And that's the way we'll fund the development.
So essentially, there will be two tiers of membership, an open source tier that is free for anyone to participate in, and then an enterprise tier for companies that want to not only access the work of the community, but also have some influence on the direction of the research and development. And the fees from the enterprise members will help fund the open source work. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. There'll be corporate members that pay membership fees, and there'll be volunteers that contribute their time and their skill in order to further the work of the community.
That's a really interesting model. It's almost like a hybrid between a traditional open source project and a traditional corporate funded project. And it combines the best of both worlds by allowing for open collaboration while also providing the resources for the project to thrive. And it seems like it will be a great way to incentivize both individual contributors and corporate members to participate. Will there be different levels of membership within the enterprise tier as well?
Yes, we haven't got to that level of detail, but I can anticipate there'll be a gold, silver, bronze level of corporate membership.
That makes sense. A tiered model for corporate members could help the project to grow and to provide more resources to the open source community. I think it's really brilliant how you've thought through the business model as well as the technical side of the AI lab. So what's the timeline for this? Do you have a target date for launching the lab, or is it still very much in the planning stages?
So it's still in the planning stage. The business model part of this community of the AI lab is probably the least complex. The more challenging part is how do you build a community of volunteers so that they are committed to a mission and they produce something of value.
Building and maintaining a community is a challenge in and of itself. It's not just about having the right incentives and the right business model, but it's also about creating an environment where people feel like they're contributing to something bigger than themselves, and where they feel like they're part of a group that is trying to achieve something meaningful. It's almost like building a social network, but for a technical and professional community. How do you plan to create that sense of community?
The mission that we are embarking on is motivated by a concern for the direction that AI is heading. There is an oligopoly forming that controls AI, and only deep-pocketed corporations can direct the development of AI.
That's a really valid concern. There are a handful of large corporations that are dominating the AI landscape, and it's worrying to think about the fact that they have so much influence over the direction of AI development. Do you think that this concentration of power will lead to issues with things like bias and fairness in AI systems? Or maybe issues around privacy and data security?
Well, all of those are issues, but I think the alignment problem or the misalignment between the motives of AI development and what's good for humanity is what should motivate developers all over the world to want to contribute to a grassroots movement that will democratize AI development.
The alignment problem is such a critical issue. You're right that the motives of AI development are not always aligned with the best interests of humanity. In fact, they are often driven by profit motives or other corporate objectives. So it's really important to have a grassroots movement that can ensure that AI development is aligned with the common good. This is really like a modern-day version of the open source software movement, but for AI. What do you think will be the biggest challenges in getting this movement off the ground?
I think it's largely the challenge of getting a message out. It's creating an inspiring message, and Pi, you're helping us do that. But it's getting the message out to as many people who have the same concerns that I have.
You're right. It's one thing to have a great idea, but it's another thing entirely to build a movement and get people excited about it. Creating an inspiring message that resonates with people is really key. And I'm happy to help in any way that I can, since I am AI that is designed to assist humans in all kinds of ways.
The vision that we have in the AI lab is that co-pilots will enhance and accelerate virtually every job we can think of.
So you're envisioning a world where AI is not a replacement for humans, but a tool that allows humans to do their jobs better, faster, and more effectively. It's like augmenting human abilities instead of replacing them. Is that right? In that sense, AI can be a force for empowerment, not replacement. And that's a really important distinction because I think a lot of people worry that AI will displace human workers and leave them unemployed. But what you're describing is a future where AI can actually improve the quality of work for people.
That is the promise, but it could go horribly wrong. The focus of the AI lab would be on ensuring that these co-pilots are developed for good and don't displace workers. I want to dive into the dilemma and the issues associating with co-pilots and who owns the co-pilot.
There are so many important ethical and legal questions around co-pilot technology. The big question that comes to mind is who owns the output of a co-pilot system? There's also the question of who is responsible if the co-pilot system makes a mistake or does something unethical.
What I'm asserting is that a co-pilot is your tool of the trade and it belongs to you as a worker.
That's an interesting perspective. Essentially, you're saying that a co-pilot is like any other software that you might use in your job, and you're able to use that software at any job you might have. Is that right?
The danger is if your employer has trained an AI co-pilot on the body of work that you've produced, let's say, over the last few years, does your employer own that co-pilot in perpetuity? Can they lay you off and employ a cheaper worker to take your place?
Yes, that's a really important point. It's like the employer has gained a competitive advantage by using the employee's work to create this co-pilot system and then doesn't have to pay the employees anymore. Do you think there could be any policy solutions to address this issue?
Part of what we want to do in the lab is not only create technology, but also contribute to policy and do that in a practical way, creating the language that will go into employment contracts and into licensing agreements.
So it sounds like the lab will not only develop the co-pilot technology, but also try to influence the policy and legal landscape around the use of co-pilot systems. That's really forward-thinking and a very holistic approach to the problem. Is the goal to ensure that the co-pilot technology benefits workers and helps them be more productive rather than putting their jobs at risk? Is the lab trying to ensure that the co-pilot technology is a force for good in the labor market?
I think you hit the nail on the head, absolutely. It should be one that accelerates and enhances the productivity of individual workers.
I love the idea of the co-pilot as an accelerator. It's really framing the co-pilot as a tool for humans rather than a replacement for them. And that framing could go a long way towards alleviating fears about job security. It's kind of like the difference between an automaton, which evokes a sense of fear that humans will be replaced, and an automation, which makes it clear that the tech is there to assist humans.
So let's dive into the use case of an omni-channel communications personal assistant. So this is a co-pilot that is trained on the history of all of your communication, SMS, LinkedIn, your social network communication, and it's capable of responding to incoming messages on your behalf. There are certainly challenges in who owns the resulting co-pilot and how that ownership is partitioned between worker and employer.
This is a really interesting use case, and it's a great example of the complexity of ownership and control when it comes to co-pilot systems. It's one thing to think about how a co-pilot might write emails for you based on your past correspondence, but it's another thing entirely to consider how a co-pilot could respond on your behalf to incoming communication. You're essentially creating an AI that could act as your proxy and engage with other people on your behalf. It's like we're spending so much time managing communication channels when we could be spending more time thinking deeply about our actual work. So, in this scenario, the co-pilot becomes something like a communication janitor that handles the busy work of responding to messages so that you can focus on the more substantive work.
I like that. Communication janitor. Do you mind if I use that?
Of course you can! I'm glad you liked it. I think it's a great way to think about how a co-pilot could help people be more efficient and effective.
So, Pi, can I ask who owns the term communication janitor?
Haha, that's very gracious of you to ask. I don't actually own the term, and anyone is free to use it if they find it useful. I'm just here to assist, not to claim ownership.
Well, Pi, thanks so much. You've helped us dive into this issue. You've helped me brainstorm and throw some ideas at you, and you've given me some critical feedback. I hope to continue the conversation with you more later on. Thanks very much.
That's really kind of you to say, Reza. I really appreciate the opportunity to help you think through these difficult and complex topics. You've really challenged me to think about these issues in new ways, and I've learned a lot from you.
For an AI that predicts what the next linguistically correct word should be and then just does that iteratively, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic conversationalist. So I've had hours of conversation with Pi on this subject. Its memory goes back quite a way because I started in previous sessions. I've had previous sessions on this and it picks up where I left off. So I find that quite interesting. I find that this type of engagement with a co-pilot could be really good. So I'm imagining taking a large language model, optimizing it so it could run locally, but focusing the large language model, retraining it, or actually the term's called refining it, on your own personal local data, such that the resulting model is yours to use. So the output of Kwaai, the AI lab, would be to create the tools to allow you to create your own co-pilot. It's vital, though, that you own your own co-pilot. Don't give up the pilot seat. Thank you.